I think every small business owner in Texas eventually faces that moment of truth.
Mm,
Maybe the market shifts unexpectedly, revenue dips, or you realize you need to strategically restructure your team just to stay profitable.
right.
And then comes the tough, agonizing question. Can I legally cut an employee's pay or hours? It sounds like it should be a straightforward business decision, but the legal reality in Texas, well, even with its at-will foundation, it is anything but simple.
Oh, absolutely.
Get the process wrong, and a cost-saving measure can quickly become a massive legal liability. So our mission today is to do a critical deep dive into the compliance requirements, the hidden risks, and, the crucial steps Texas employers must take to navigate these challenging waters. We're unpacking the insights from a recent, highly practical article published by the Unit Consulting. They're a Texas HR outsourcing firm that really focuses on helping small and mid-sized businesses get these complex workforce decisions right.
Okay, let's unpack this because the tension here for business owners is completely understandable.
Right.
You need to save money to keep the business afloat, but you don't want to break the law or, frankly, lose your best people. So, the quick summary is this. Yes, because of Texas's at-will employment foundation, employers generally can reduce pay or hours.
Okay.
But, and this is huge but, that freedom is immediately tethered by two things: federal FLSA rules and very strict state requirements on notice. The biggest mistake we see employers make is focusing on the need for the cut instead of the process of the cut.
Ah, that's a key distinction.
It is. The key to avoiding costly legal trouble isn't just if you can reduce the wage, but how you communicate it and, critically, when that reduction takes effect.
That distinction between the decision and the implementation, that seems to be where most owners get into trouble. So let's start with that foundational layer, at-will employment. What does it actually allow you to do?
Well, the general principle is incredibly powerful for employers. Texas is an at-will state, and that means, unless there's an explicit contract, the employer can change almost all terms of employment pay rate, scheduled hours, at any time for any lawful reason. It gives Texas employers a huge amount of operational flexibility.
But you immediately brought up a major limit. Lawful doesn't mean unregulated, so what's the non-negotiable legal requirement here?
It's the requirement for the change to be prospective.
Prospective, meaning looking forward.
Exactly. This is the first trap, and it's a big one. The Texas Workforce Commission, or TWC, which handles wage claims, is crystal clear on this. Changes in wages must always apply moving forward. You absolutely cannot cut pay retroactively for work an employee has already performed.
So if I realize on Thursday that I need to lower someone's pay and their work week started on Monday, I still owe them the higher rate for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, even if I tell them today.
Precisely. Think of it like a new road sign. You can't issue tickets for speeding based on a new speed limit before that sign is actually installed and visible.
That's a good analogy.
The current pay period is the current speed limit. Any work performed under the old rate has to be paid at that old rate. And tying right into that, Texas Labor Code Section 62.0515 mandates specific notice.
Okay.
Employers have to notify employees of wage changes in writing before those changes go into effect. That documented, clear, prospective notice is the single most important piece of paper you have if a wage claim ever gets filed.
And if you don't do that,
It's not just a fine. It converts a legal business decision into an illegal wage theft claim. It's a huge deal.
wow. Okay, so that makes the process for hourly employees relatively clear. It's really about timing and documentation.
Yeah.
Now let's shift from that broad rule to the specifics, hourly versus salary, because this is where the risk really changes, right?
The risks absolutely diverge, and it's all based on the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA classification.
Okay.
For non-exempt or hourly employees, the rate itself is actually the least of your worries. Yeah, you can reduce an employee's hourly wage to almost anything, as long as it stays at or above the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour. The rules here are all about procedure. Written notice before the pay period starts, accurate time records for overtime, and absolutely no retroactive cuts. The danger is all about procedural negligence.
Got it. Okay, let's transition to the salaried or exempt employees. This is the area where it gets, as you said, really interesting, and where cost-cutting can just blow up the whole employment structure.
This is truly the risk zone for small and mid-sized businesses. When you start adjusting the salary of an exempt employee, You aren't just adjusting pay, you are fundamentally jeopardizing their legal status under the FLSA.
And if an employee loses that exempt status, what's the immediate, catastrophic consequence for the business?
They automatically become non-exempt.
Which means,
It instantly triggers overtime pay requirements for every single hour they work over 40 in a work week, even if they're a high-level manager. The main tripwire here is the salary basis threshold. To qualify as exempt, an employee must be paid on a salary basis of at least $684 per week.
$684. So let's say I have a manager, Sarah, making $800 a week. Business is slow, so I cut her salary to $650 a week starting next month. That one cut, which saves me $150, suddenly exposes me to massive overtime claims if she's working 50 hours a week, which, managers often do.
That is exactly the scenario. You reduce the salary to save $150, but because you drop below that $684 floor, Sarah is now owed 10 hours of overtime at time and a half for every week she works over 40.
Which completely wipes out the savings.
It does more than that. It creates a significant back pay liability. You have to keep that salary floor at or above $684 a week and make sure the job duties still meet the exemption tests. Both have to be true.
And the sources mention something subtle, a salary definition trap. Even if the pay stays above $684, are you always safe?
Not necessarily, no. The FLSA requires an employee be paid a salary, which implies a steady, predictable income, regardless of the quality or quantity of work.
Okay.
So if you cut a manager's salary in January because it's slow, then again in April because of a supply issue, and then again in July. Even if the rate stays above that $684 number, a regulator could argue you're undermining the whole idea of a salary basis.
So it starts to look less like a salary.
And more like you're manipulating hourly pay based on business needs. The FLSA wants stability for exempt employees. Constant pay manipulation can cause the entire classification to fail, exposing you to 2 or even 3 years of back pay and penalties.
That is a fascinating nuance. So we've established the reduction can be technically legal if it's done prospectively and above that FLSA floor. But let's move on to the next section, where a perfectly legal reduction still lands you in legal or financial trouble. This is where intention comes in.
Yes. This is where employment law stops being about simple math and starts being about motive and context. The biggest financial risks come from discrimination and retaliation claims.
And those can be triggered even if you followed all the TWC notice rules perfectly.
Absolutely.
Okay, walk us through a retaliation claim. How does a simple cost-cutting measure get labeled as illegal retribution?
It happens when you make a selective reduction, meaning you target specific people, and that reduction happens shortly after that employee engaged in what's called a protected activity.
What are we talking about when we say protected activity?
We're talking about things like the employee requesting FMLA leave, reporting a safety violation, making an internal pay complaint, or filing an EEOC claim about harassment. If you cut the pay of the one employee who just filed a formal complaint about a supervisor, even if your business needs the cut, the timing makes it look vindictive.
So the employer could have given proper notice, but the timing and the selection make it look like retribution under Texas law or Title VII. How do you defend yourself against that?
You need an airtight defense. You have to be prepared to show legitimate business-related reasons for the reduction and critically consistent application.
Consistent application.
If you cut Sarah's pay, but not the pay of 3 other managers at her level, you need a bulletproof, non-discriminatory reason why Sarah was singled out. If you can't provide that, a regulator will assume the worst, that the cut was retaliation. This is why meticulous documentation is just so crucial.
Okay, another serious consequence to worry about is constructive discharge. A business owner might think, if I cut their pay drastically, they'll quit and I won't have to pay severance. But that just opens a new can of worms, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Constructive discharge is the legal argument that the working conditions, in this case the drastic cut in pay or hours, were made so intolerable that the employee had no real choice but to quit. It basically treats the resignation as if it were a forced termination.
And if an employee successfully makes that argument, what's the financial fallout?
Well, even though Texas is a very employer-friendly state, a successful constructive discharge argument can open the door for that employee to get unemployment benefits.
Which costs the employer.
Yes, through increased contributions. And even more severely, it could strengthen their standing to pursue a wrongful termination or discrimination lawsuit, especially if they can link the intolerable pay cut back to a protected activity.
And let's not forget the administrative cost. Even with a minor, perfectly legal cut, the business owner still faces a consequence: partial unemployment claims.
Exactly. This is death by a thousand cuts for a small business owner trying to save money. If you cut an employee's hours by just 10 a week, they can file for partial unemployment benefits to make up the difference. And this immediately creates an administrative burden. Now you, the employer, have to respond to the TWC claim, provide all the documents, and explain the business necessity. For an owner who's already wearing 10 hats, that is time spent fighting claims instead of running the business.
It seems like compliance isn't just about saving money on payroll, it's about avoiding these much larger liabilities.
That's it exactly.
So that brings us to the protective measures. If a reduction is necessary, what are the sort of 3 pillars of protection employers should adopt, drawing from experts like the unit consulting?
The unit consulting's guidance really centers on turning a potential liability into a manageable business decision through, well, structure and documentation. The first pillar is communicate clearly. Give written notice of any change before it takes effect. But go beyond just the legal minimum.
Be transparent.
Yes, be transparent about the business reasons, an economic downturn, restructuring, and allow your employees to ask questions. That transparency is crucial for morale. Destroyed morale will cost you way more in turnover than you ever saved on payroll.
That's a great point, but isn't there a risk that telling employees you're struggling just causes your best people to jump ship immediately?
It's a valid concern, and that's why the communication has to be strategic. You aren't just saying, we're broke.
Right.
You're saying, we are proactively managing a temporary challenge to ensure the long-term viability of the company, and this strategic temporary reduction avoids layoffs. The framing is everything. The second pillar is absolutely vital. Document everything.
This is your shield.
It is your shield against the TWC and the EEOC. You need meticulous records of all notices, proof of delivery, employee acknowledgments, and a detailed file explaining the rationale. If you can't prove why you did it, a regulator will assume the worst. The burden of proof is on you.
And the third pillar, I'm guessing, combats that retaliation risk we talked about.
Exactly. Stay consistent. Apply reductions consistently across similarly situated employees. Consistency is your #1 defense against discrimination claims. A 10% cut across the entire management team is far easier to defend than cutting the salary of only one employee who just happened to take FMLA leave.
That makes perfect sense. So what does this all mean for the small or mid-sized business owner in Texas who doesn't have a big internal legal or HR team? It sounds like you really need help guiding these strategic decisions.
Well, it connects directly to the expertise that a firm like the Unit Consulting provides. Navigating the intersection of TWC rules, FLSA status, and federal anti-retaliation laws is a minefield. The Unit Consulting has a great rule of thumb in their article. If you wouldn't want to explain your decision to a TWC hearing officer, the EEOC, or a judge, rethink your process.
That's a powerful statement.
It is, and that's the value of having on-demand HR experts. They help guide these decisions, making sure the reduction is legal, prospective, and documented. They can draft the compliant notices, analyze the risk of losing exempt status, and provide crucial support if you do face a TWC claim. They help Texas businesses reduce risk, not just payroll. They ensure that compliance is met and that the financial integrity of the business is protected.
You know, the real takeaway here seems to be that a cost-saving measure that is technically legal might still be a terrible idea if it destroys morale or leads to an expensive retaliation claim.
Right. Legal compliance is the floor, not the ceiling.
That's the perfect way to put it.
The lesson for any business owner in Texas is that a reduction in pay should never be treated as just a budget item. It is a major HR event that has to be handled with precision, documentation, and foresight. A perfectly executed pay cut saves money without costing you a lawsuit or crippling employee trust.
So if you are navigating these specific Texas rules, or if you need to ensure your documentation and compliance processes are ironclad, it sounds like tailored HR support and expertise are essential. And if you're looking for that on-demand guidance, or if you need help with those written notices and TWC claim support, we encourage you to contact the Texas HR outsourcing experts at the Unit Consulting today. They can help you make these decisions compliantly and strategically. You can reach the Unit Consulting at 956-230-6866. Thank you for joining us for this crucial deep dive into minimizing liability in Texas employment law. We hope this knowledge helps you not just manage, but really lead your workforce with confidence.